we have an empty bookshelf. This is the last video I am filming in this house, not including like the moving vlogs that I'm posting, but I don't know how to film. This is the last video, like proper sit down video with this background. Hey guys, it's Isabella. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my channel if you are new. Today we're going to go over all of the books that I read in February. Now I read a total of 5 books, but I also DNF'd 5 books, so it was actually not the best reading month because every single thing I read nearly I was like not vibing with it. I had a few soft DNFs. I'm not really going to talk about them just because I think I was falling in a bit of a reading slump, but there are a few books that I DNF'd, like I won't be returning, and we will talk about them at the end of the video, but I want to start with the books that I read and completed. Now this video is going to be a little bit different because usually I hold up the books as I go along. I'm not doing that because all my books are in boxes right now, so we're just going to put a photo on the screen. And also I usually include my me filling out my reading journal at the end of the video, and I'm not doing that this wrap up because again my reading journal is in a box and we're not gonna do that. Okay, it's hard enough getting those boxes filled, we're not gonna undo it, so I'm really sorry. I'll be back next month in a new house and we will continue the way we always do. Anyway, the first book that I read in February, the one that took up the first half of the month, I actually started reading it in January, but that is Priory of the Orange Tree. This is definitely the biggest book I have ever read. I think it's over 800 pages, high fantasy. It was just an experience. I bought the book and I started it immediately because I knew I wanted to read it, but I knew if I put it on my shelf it was staying there, like I would not read it. So I just read it straight away and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. There were a few POVs that I didn't absolutely love, which is why it got a 4 and not a 5, but it had a very strong plot and I loved the majority of the characters. I did feel the ending was a little bit rushed. Like I remember, I think it was like the last 40 to 80 pages, the big war that was meant to happen hadn't happened yet, and I was like, how are we going to wrap this book up with like 40 to 80 pages left? Like I didn't understand how that was going to work, and it did wrap up pretty good. Like I was satisfied with the ending, but I do feel like it was a little bit rushed. I would have liked a bit more from the ending, but it wasn't necessarily like disappointing. Like I wouldn't say it was a disappointing ending. I was satisfied with it. It's just not really pacing wise what I was expecting. I think this book is perfect for those who are character driven and plot driven. It has a really good, like, it has very like a very detailed plot, but it also has a lot of character development, and it's just like I said, you get lots of point of view, so it's not just following one character, you're following several and they live completely different lives and you're just trying to piece together how they interconnect and why we're getting these POVs from these people. And it was a very enjoyable read. If you are into fantasy, I would highly recommend. I probably wouldn't recommend to people who are just getting started because it was, the first few hundred pages was a little bit dense and I was reading about 30 to 50 pages a day, but it worked. So fun fact, or not fun fact, but like a tip, if you're going to read that book, just read like 50 pages a day, because if you read too much you're gonna forget what's happening. You really need to pay attention because it's such a long book. I do believe the prequel just came out, but for some reason I don't want to read that yet, because I'm like, well, I've already read one very large book this year, so that'll have to be next year's. Sorry. The next book I completed in February was Push. This was such an interesting read. I actually gave it to someone who I work with to read because I was like so diversive. I didn't really know how I was feeling. I ended up giving it 3.5. Like I haven't really made up my mind. I'll probably just round it to a 3, but it's like a high 3. Like I really enjoyed it. Probably more to a 3.5 to be honest, but I don't really, yeah, I don't know, somewhere between there. It's about a mother who has a child and just doesn't really have a very strong connection with that child, and basically thinks the child's a monster. And it's a really interesting read because as you're reading it, you're trying to determine whether the mum's crazy or the kid's crazy. And I love that premise. There are so many books with that premise, and I just find it so interesting to read about. Even after reading it, I'm not really sure who was crazy. I feel like they both were a little cuckoo. Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about this book. Like, it wasn't incredible, it wasn't bad, it was just unlike anything I've ever read. If you're looking for a book that like will literally just make you stare at a wall and be like, what the hell did I just read? Recommend. Like I said, it's just weird, and I've never read anything like that book before, and I'm really glad I read it because it had been on my shelf. That was actually my buzzword reading pick. It was verbs, I believe, and I picked push because obviously, you know, push things, doing word, yeah. So I highly recommend. It was an interesting reading experience. This month's Boris Backyard pick, if you don't know, I love this author. I discovered him either in December or January. He's on Kindle Unlimited. So this was a book I read on my Kindle. It came with a crash, which I'm trying to remember. I think I gave it 3.5. I believe I gave it 3.5. It is a airplane crash horror. So the airplane crash, there's a few survivors, and there is a creature that's lurking in the woods where they are. Boris Backyard's books are very similar in the term where they take a very simple plot and make it twisty. He always has some type of monster or creature, which I find so interesting to read about because you're like, what is this? Like, it's unlike, you know, like the creatures are so unique, and sometimes he takes it from like folklore or sometimes he just makes it up. But this one was really interesting. I have a really bad fear of planes, and I'm actually going in a plane in like the end of June for the first time, so probably shouldn't be reading about plane crashes, but you know, at least they survived at the beginning of the book at least. Boris always writes very unlikable characters. Like, I don't think I've ever read a book by his where his characters aren't unlikable. That's just kind of his signature move, and it kind of works for the story because like, you would think for a horror you'd want to root for the main character, but in his books you're kind of not rooting for the character, and then you get more of the creature. It's really hard to explain, but I love it. I have one more book in his Creatures Encounter series, which is the one I've been putting off because there is one thing that scares me more than planes, and it's the ocean. And this is set like 30,000 feet under the water or something like that. Like, it's a creature. The other thing I can think of when I like read the synopsis of this new book that I'll probably try and read in March, maybe not, is the megalodon. That's the only thing I think of, is some creature that lurks at the bottom of the ocean, and that just sounds like a big no, thank you. I'll probably enjoy it, but I think it's going to be the one that's the hardest for me to get to. Anyway, this not about this, I'm getting distracted. Another little book I read was LVOE by Atticus. It's his new release poetry book, and I read this on Valentine's Day. It was my Valentine's Day read, and it was amazing. I think it's my favorite. I think it's my favorite book by him so far. I just really enjoy it. And it was not as depressing as his other reads, which was nice. It was nice to have a bit of a break from that. The last book that I completed before we're going to get into the DNFs was Never Lie by Frida McFadden, and I'm actually reading or planning to read 2 of her books in March. If you haven't seen my March TBR, I'll leave it linked down below. I posted it before this one, but this was my first impression of Frida McFadden, and it was a pretty good one. I gave her book 3 stars. It was very fast paced. I was entertained. It didn't blow my mind, but I'm not regretting reading it. It was good. It was good. It was a decent thriller. Like, I would recommend it. It's about this couple that goes and like buys a house or is wanting to buy a house, and they go to this place where they're looking like a house and they're viewing it, but it's in the middle of a snowstorm. Of course, they always are. And the house used to belong to a therapist before she went missing, presumed dead. So yeah, I will say the plot twist, it did get me. It did get me. I was blind, completely blind. Like, the ending wasn't like a total shocker, but the plot twist that was thrown in there, I was blindsided. My mouth did drop. So I was like, okay. So shock factor, if you want to be shocked, I highly recommend. The only reason it didn't get higher than 3 stars is just because it was just really, like, it was a decent thriller. The only thing that wowed me was the plot twist. And I just don't think it's on the same level as other thrillers that I've given higher, but I would recommend it. Like, it was jaw-dropping. Now it's time for the books that I DNF'd. So we're gonna start off strong. If you've seen my Booktubers Choose What I Read reading vlog, you already know I DNF'd both books that I read for that vlog. Like, I am making a series out of like Booktubers Choose What I Read, but that was the first vlog, the first installment of that series, and I DNF'd both of them. So a little spoiler for that vlog, but the first book was Heartless by Elsie Silver. I'm not a big romance reader. I'm trying to get more into the genre, but I'm just very picky, and this was a good example of that. I don't even remember his name, but the male main character, get away from me. Literally don't know what y'all see in him. I was 120 pages in and I was like, I can't do it. I did love the female main character though. She was good, but he just ruined it. So I couldn't get into it. And then I also DNF'd Jade City. Now this is a soft DNF, I think. I think I'm gonna keep it. Like, I've got the physical copy and I think I'm gonna keep it and maybe return to it another time. I was like 100 pages in, bored. I know that's really unpopular. I know people love that book. I don't know if it's just because it's so hyped that I feel like I can't enjoy it, which is why I'm gonna keep it and maybe return to it another time, but I just was a little bit bored. So yeah. Another book I tried to read physically and couldn't get into, but will keep it on my TBR to possibly return to, is Icebreaker. I was so excited for this book, but I kid you not, it is literally just spicy scenes. Like, it was 80 pages in, I think. Like 80, I don't think I made it any further than 100 pages. 80 pages in, and they were already like getting all up in there. Like, that's gonna be the last 8 pages for me. Like, there was just no tension. There was no tension, and it was just so insta-love to the point where I just could not enjoy it. And yeah, I don't know, like, I will potentially return to it. I just think I have to be in the mood for it, like a friends to lovers, which is what that is. Like, you cannot tell me that it's enemies to lovers, no way. So I'm gonna keep it and possibly return to it when I am in the headspace and I know that I'm going into a friends to lovers book. It's not enemies to lovers. Don't let anyone tell you that, because they're lying. The next book I DNF'd was People We Meet on Vacation, aka You and Me on Vacation. This is the second time I've tried to read this book. I even tried to listen to it on audio, but I don't know, it's not a bad book. This is the confusing thing about this book, right? It wasn't a bad book and I was enjoying the characters, but for some reason I just wanted, like, I didn't want to pick it up. I was like, this is the second time I've tried to read it and just didn't want to pick it up. I don't know if it's like a similar thing with Icebreaker in terms of it's just a bit too insta-lovey for me and there's not enough enemy, there's not enough pining and tension, but I'm just not really into it. I will probably keep my copy of it, maybe give it a third go. I love Emily Henry, okay? And it pains me to not really like one of her books. I do have book lovers that I still have to read, so I'm gonna keep my copy of People Meet on Vacation just so that I can have it in my collection. But my next book by her that I will tackle is Book Lovers. I think maybe just because People Meet on Vacation is an early release from her, and you can tell, I think she is grown as an author, which is great, but you can tell when reading like Beach Read and then you go to read People Meet on Vacation, and you can see the writing difference in it. Not just like the story, not just the tropes, but the writing is just so different. And the very last book that I DNF'd this month was on my Kindle, and it's called Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. Now this book was not bad, and I would highly recommend to those who like cozy fantasy. My problem is I don't like cozy fantasy, and I keep trying. I read Legends and Lattes and I DNF'd it halfway through. I hated it because I was bored. Same thing happened here. Like, I try to read cozy fantasies and they get nowhere. So here's a cozy fantasy rec. I'm a high stakes girl. Like, I need high stakes, and low stakes just aren't my thing. But it wasn't a bad book, it just wasn't my vibe. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. The next few videos you will see are going to, of course, be moving vlogs. I definitely filmed one. I'm hoping to maybe film a second of me actually moving into the house, but I'm not promising that. It depends how crazy and hectic it is. But yes, I will see you guys when I'm in my new house or in the movie vlog. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you like. Bye guys!